Hello everyone, I am CA Pratik Badani and in this video we are going to quickly revise the capital gains chapter for CA intermediate examinations. This is part 1 of the lecture. So first and foremost, like any other head of income, even the capital gains head has a charging section and a computation section. The charging section is section 45 subsection 1, which tells that tax is chargeable on profit and gains from the transfer of a capital asset in the year of transfer. So when will capital gain arise? Capital gain arises when a capital asset is transferred and it is taxable in the year of transfer. Okay, sir, what is a capital asset? Listen very carefully, Kana, very important definition. Section 2 clause 14 defines capital asset that a capital asset is property of any kind. It can be movable, immovable, tangible, intangible. It can be used for business or not. Okay, whether or not connected with the business or profession. So any type of property is called a capital asset. However, there are 6 exceptions to a capital asset. What are the 6 exceptions? Number 1, stock in trade. So stock in trade, consumable stores, raw material, etc. related to business or profession will not be considered as capital asset. Okay. So if a business is having a stock, do not consider it as capital asset. However, if there is a foreign institutional investor FII, if a foreign institutional investor is having any security, then those security you should not see whether it is stock or capital asset. It will always be considered as capital asset and it will not be considered as stock in the income tax law. Okay, so if a foreign institutional investor is having any security, the security will be always considered as capital asset. You get my point? Now let's come to exception number 2, and that is personal effects. Sir, what is personal effects? Personal effects means any movable property used for personal nature. Okay, so it can be a pen, it can be a mobile phone, it can be clothes, etc. So whatever movable property it is used for personal nature, then it is called personal effects. However, there are 6 exceptions to personal effect also. So it is exception to exception means inclusion. What are those 6 assets? That is jewelry, archaeological collection, drawing, painting, any other work of art and sculpture. Let's tell once again: jewelry, archaeological collection, drawings, paintings, any other work of art and sculpture. So all these 6 assets, even though they are personal effects, still they will be considered as capital asset. Hence it is exception to exception, hence inclusion in the definition of capital asset. So if a jewelry is sold, Kanna, then the profit on the sale of jewelry will be called capital gain, even though jewelry is a personal effect. But for all other personal effects, so for example, if I am having this pen and it is used for personal use, then if I sell this pen, the profit will not be called capital gain because the pen itself is not a capital asset. You get my point? Now let's come to the next exception, exception number 3, that is rural agricultural land. Sir, agricultural land situated in the rural area, it is called rural agricultural land. What is rural agricultural land? Any land which is not a urban agricultural land is called rural agricultural land. You remember agricultural income. Okay. So what is urban agricultural land? Okay. Urban agricultural land is a land situated in urban area and assessed to land revenue. So what is urban area? Urban area is the area where the population is 10,000 or more, and if the population is more than 10,000 up to 1 lakh, then 2 kilometers surrounding the area. If the population is more than 1 lakh up to 10 lakh, then 6 kilometers surrounding the area, and if the population is more than 10 lakhs, then 8 kilometers surrounding the area. You remember the definition? Okay. So any area which is not a urban area, it is called rural area, and agricultural land situated in rural area is called rural agricultural land. Rural agricultural land is not a capital asset. Hence, if a rural agricultural land is sold, capital gain will not arise. You get my point? Okay. Now let's come to the fourth exception. Fourth exception is 6.5% gold bonds 1977, 7% gold bond 1980, National Defense Gold Bond 1980. Not that important, but still you have to read it so that when it comes in question, you are able to identify. Next, fifth exception, special bearer bonds 1991, and last exception, gold deposit bond under the gold deposit scheme 1999 and gold monetization scheme 2015. And in the income from other sources chapter, you will also know that interest on these gold deposit scheme 1999 and gold monetization scheme 2015 is exempt from tax under section 10 clause 15. So it is not a capital asset, hence capital gains won't arise, and interest is also exempt on the gold deposit scheme and gold monetization scheme. So this is the capital asset definition. Very, very important. Let us read once again quickly. Let us summarize the definition. So section 2 clause 14 defines capital asset that a capital asset is any property of any kind. It is whether tangible, intangible, whether movable, immovable, whether or not connected with the business or profession. However, there are 6 exceptions. Exception number 1 is stock in trade. However, for a foreign institutional investor, if they are having any security, even the stock in trade will be considered as capital asset. In short, any security held by foreign institutional investor will be called capital asset. Okay. Exception number 2 is personal effects. So personal effects are not capital asset. However, 6 personal effects will be called capital asset. They are JAD pass, that is jewelry, archaeological collection, drawing, painting, any other work of art and sculpture. Then exception number 3, rural agricultural land will not be called capital asset. Number 4, okay, specified gold bonds, that is 6.5% gold bonds 1977, 7% gold bonds 1980 and national defense gold bond 1980 will not be considered as capital asset. Number 5, special bearer bonds 1991 will not be considered as capital asset. And number 6, gold deposit bond under the gold deposit scheme 1999 or gold monetization scheme 2015 also will not be called capital asset, and even the interest on such gold bonds is exempt under section 10 clause 15. Okay. Now let's come to the definition of transfer. Section 2 clause 47 defines transfer, and transfer includes sale, exchange, relinquishment. Sale, exchange, relinquishment. Relinquishment means what? To give up. And number 2, extinguishment of any right. Extinguishment means giving up the right. That means transferring the right from one person to another person. For example, giving up the license so that the license can be used by another person. Next, number 3, compulsory acquisition. So if government comes and compulsorily acquires the property, that is also called transfer. Okay. Number 4, conversion of capital asset into stock in trade. So if a capital asset is converted into stock, it is called transfer. Number 5, giving the possession of the property in part performance of a contract. Okay. So even if the possession is transferred, it is also called transfer. We will learn this in detail in joint development agreement. Okay. Then number 6, transaction having the effect of transferring or enabling the enjoyment of immovable property. Okay. So when we studied section 27, okay, studied section 27 not in chapter 2, that is I in chapter 4 B, house property, when I was taking the deemed owner concept, I told you about members of cooperative society, companies, etc. That is, there are many flats and all the flats are registered in the name of cooperative society, where the people living in the flats are the members of the cooperative society or the shareholders of the company. And when the membership is sold from one person to another person, okay, it will have the effect of selling the flat from one person to another person. Hence, it is called a transfer. Okay, I hope you are able to link with the concept of deemed owner. Next, redemption of zero coupon bonds. So if a zero coupon bond is redeemed, that is also called transfer. So let us see transfer definition once again. Very, very important. What is transfer? Sale, exchange, relinquishment, extinguishment of any right, compulsory acquisition, conversion of capital asset into stock in trade, giving possession of a property, then transaction having the effect of transferring the immovable property, and then redemption of zero coupon bonds. So all these points are called transfer. Okay. So if a capital asset is transferred, then capital gain will arise. Correct. However, there is section 47. Section 47 is listing down so many transactions that will not be considered as transfer. Transaction not regarded as transfer. So all these transactions, even though it is coming in the definition of capital asset and transfer, it will not be considered as transfer. Hence, capital gain will not arise. What are those transactions? Number 1, full or partial partition of HUF. So if a HUF is partitioned, okay, and the share is given to the members respectively, it will not be considered as transfer. No capital gains is going to arise. Next, number 2, gift or irrevocable trust. So if any gift is given or if any irrevocable trust is created in the name of person, then the asset is given to the trust, then it is not considered as transfer except sweat equity shares. So if sweat equity shares or ESOPs etc., employee stock option plan is given from the employer to employee, okay, even though it seems like a gift, it is not included here. Hence, it is considered as transfer. Listen one more time. If an employer gives any sweat equity shares to the employee, it will very much be considered as transfer. Okay. Valuation of perquisites we have studied in salary chapter. You remember the point? Now, holding. So, holding to 100% Indian subsidiary. If a holding company transfers any asset to a 100% Indian subsidiary company, then it is not called transfer, because it is a transaction not regarded as transfer. Next, if a subsidiary company transfers any asset to a 100% Indian holding company, then also that transaction is not regarded as transfer. Next, amalgamating. If an amalgamating company transfers to a Indian amalgamated company, it is not considered as transfer. What is amalgamation, sir? Amalgamation is defined in section 2 clause 1b. Amalgamation is a situation where one or more companies join another company, or one or more companies are merged to form a new company. So it is called amalgamation. However, there are certain conditions which should be satisfied for a transaction to be called amalgamation as per the Income Tax Act. What are those conditions? Condition number 1, all the property of the amalgamating company should become the property of amalgamated company. Number 2, all the liabilities of amalgamating company should become the liabilities of amalgamated company. And number 3, the shareholders having at least 3/4 shareholding, that is 75% shareholding in the amalgamating company, should get a share in amalgamated company. If all the conditions are satisfied, then it will be called amalgamation. And if any amalgamating company transfers the assets to Indian amalgamated company, it will not be regarded as transfer, hence capital gain will not arise. Next, demerged company. If a demerged company transfers the assets to Indian resulting company, then also it is not regarded as transfer. Sir, what is demerger? Demerger is defined in section 2 clause 19 AA. Okay, demerger means what? Where any part of a company is demerged from that company to form a new company. I gave you example of Titan. Titan has a Titan brand, Tanishq brand, Fast Track brand. So if Tanishq brand is coming out of Titan and forming a new company, it is called demerger. Here Titan is the demerged company and the Tanishq will be a resulting company. Correct? However, in demerger also, only if the conditions are satisfied, it will be called demerger as per the Income Tax Act. What are the conditions? Number 1, the transfer should take place as a going concern. That is, when Tanishq is going to come out from Titan, it should be a going concern. Next, all the property of the undertaking being demerged should become the property of the resulting company. All the liabilities of the undertaking being demerged should become the liability of the resulting company. Then the properties and liabilities should be transferred at book value and do not consider revaluation. And number 4, shareholders having at least 3/4 shareholding in the demerged undertaking should get the share in the resulting company. If all the conditions are satisfied, then it is called demerger. And if a demerged company transfers any asset to a Indian resulting company, then it is a transaction not regarded as transfer, hence capital gain won't arise. Next, shares issued by resulting company when demerger took place. So when demerger takes place, that is when Tanishq comes out of Titan, then the shareholders of Titan will receive the Tanishq shares, correct? So when the shareholders of Titan are giving up their Titan shares and receiving Tanishq shares, that is not regarded as transfer, hence capital gain won't arise. Next, shares issued by amalgamated company when amalgamation took place. So when amalgamation take place, the amalgamated company, okay, they will lose their shares, and the amalgamating company will lose their shares, and they will get the new shares of the amalgamated company. This is also not regarded as transfer. So hence, if I give up my old shares and get new shares, it will not be regarded as transfer in case of amalgamation. Next, rupee denominated bond. So if a non-resident transfers a rupee denominated bond to another non-resident outside India, it is not regarded as transfer. Next, if a non-resident transfers the government securities to another non-resident outside India, it is not regarded as transfer. Next, redemption of a sovereign gold bond by individual. So if the assessee is an individual and the sovereign gold bonds are redeemed, okay, it means it is getting matured, hence that transaction will not be regarded as transfer. However, before the redemption, if the individual transfers the sovereign gold bond, it is very much regarded as transfer. Okay, next, transferring any jewelry, archaeological collection, drawing, painting, any other work of art, sculpture, photos, etc. to a national museum, art gallery or public museum. So if such artwork, etc. are transferred to a national museum, art gallery or public museum, it is a transaction not regarded as transfer. Next, if any bonds, debenture stock or deposit certificate, bond, debenture stock or deposit certificate is converted into shares or debentures, then also it is a transaction not regarded as transfer. Okay, next, preference shares converted into equity shares. So if preference shares are converted into equity shares, it is transaction not regarded as transfer. Capital gain will not arise. Next, transfer of capital asset under reverse mortgage. Sir, what is reverse mortgage? Reverse mortgage means a senior citizen gives their house to the bank. Okay, and what do they receive in return? In return, they receive regular monthly, quarterly, or annual installments. Okay, or it can also be a loan for up to 20 years. After their death, the bank gives the option to the legal heir to repay the loan and get their house back, or else it will be sold by the bank to recover the loan along with the interest, and the balance amount is given back to the legal heirs. Okay, so when the senior citizen is giving their house to the bank, okay, the possession of the house is given to the bank, and I earlier told you that even if the possession is given, it will be regarded as transfer. However, if the possession is given by a senior citizen to the bank in a scheme of reverse mortgage, it will not be considered as transfer. Later I also told you that amount received by senior citizen is exempt from tax under section 10 clause 43. However, later on when the bank will sell the property, then surely capital gain is going to arise. Next, consolidating scheme of mutual fund, consolidating plan of mutual fund. So if two schemes or two plans of mutual fund are joined together, or two or more schemes are joined together to form a new scheme, okay, it is also not regarded as transfer. However, it is applicable only if equity schemes are joined together to form another equity scheme, or debt schemes are joined together to form another debt scheme. If equity and debt, okay, are combined together, then it will be considered as transfer. If equity and equity are joined together to form a debt scheme, it will be considered as transfer. If debt and debt are combined together to form equity, then also it will be considered as transfer. So when it is not a transfer, it is not a transfer when equity plus equity equal to equity, or debt plus debt equal to debt. You get my point? I hope you are clear. So all these transactions are not regarded as transfer, and there is also one more transaction not regarded as transfer that we will see when we are studying the liquidation of company. Okay. Now we know about the charging section, that is section 45 subsection 1. Now let us jump to the computation section of capital gain. What does the computation section say? Computation section says that how to compute capital gain. So how to compute? First we have to find the full value of consideration. What is full value of consideration? Very simple. It is nothing but the sale price of the capital asset. Then we have to reduce the transfer expenses. So transfer expenses like brokerage, etc. should be reduced from the sale price. However, keep in mind that security transaction tax should not be reduced. Security transaction tax should not be reduced in the case of sale, also in the case of purchase also. So keep in mind, security transaction tax should not be reduced. Now, net consideration. So From the full value of consideration, when you reduce the transfer expenses, you will get the net consideration. From this net consideration, you should reduce the cost of acquisition or indexed cost of acquisition, cost of improvement or indexed cost of improvement. Then you will find the short term or long term capital gain. I told you that for indexed, that is for long term capital asset, you have to do the indexation to find the indexed cost of acquisition or indexed cost of improvement, which we are going to study in a few minutes. Okay, then you will find short term capital gain for short term capital asset, long term capital gain for long term capital asset. However, for depreciable assets, okay, there will always be short term capital asset when the depreciable asset is under WDV method. I hope you are able to link. Then, after finding the short term capital gain, if there is any exemption under section 54 series, then you should reduce it. Then finally you will find the taxable short term or long term capital gain. So how to compute capital gain? From the full value of consideration, reduce the transfer expenses. However, in the transfer expenses, do not include the security transaction tax. Then you will get the net consideration. From the net consideration, reduce cost of acquisition, which is nothing but purchase price, and cost of improvement, which is nothing but capital expenditure incurred. Okay, and if the asset is a long term capital asset, you should do the indexation to find the indexed cost of acquisition or indexed cost of improvement. Then you will find the short term or long term capital gain or capital loss. From that, you should reduce 54 series exemption to find the taxable capital gain. You get my point? Okay. Now, firstly, let us learn about period of holding concept. Period of holding concept. Okay. So what is period of holding? Period of holding is the period between the acquisition till the transfer. So when I buy a capital asset till when I sell the capital asset. So from the buying date till the selling date, it is called period of holding. The period between buying date and selling date is called period of holding. However, there are special cases where period of holding will differ. I am going to tell about them also. Okay. Now, period of holding can be can determine the asset to be a short term capital asset or long term capital asset. So now let us see what is a short term capital asset, what is a long term capital asset. Long term capital asset is any capital asset other than short term capital asset. Then what is short term capital asset? Short term capital asset is a capital asset whose period of holding is up to 12 months, that is 1 year, in the case of number 1 listed security. Listed security except units. So if there are any securities which are listed in the recognized stock exchange, then up to 12 months they will be considered as short term. After 12 months they will be considered as long term. Then number 2, units of equity oriented fund and UTI. Units of equity oriented fund and UTI, it can be listed or non-listed, it does not matter. They will be considered as short term for up to 12 months, and after 12 months they will be considered long term. Then zero coupon bond. Zero coupon bond also up to 1 year short term, more than 1 year long term. Now let's come to 24-month category. All the unlisted shares, unlisted securities illa, unlisted shares, all the unlisted shares will be considered as short term up to 24 months, more than 24 months long term. Even land and building, and both land or building or both, up to 2 years short term, more than 2 years long term. Then all the other capital asset, which includes units of a debt oriented fund. Equity oriented fund is 1 year category. Okay, debt oriented fund will come in 3 years category. Be very careful. Then all the unlisted securities other than shares, and then all the remaining capital asset up to 3 years it is short term, more than 3 years it is long term. Okay. So period of holding. What is period of holding? It is the period from the acquisition till the transfer. If this period of holding, there are three categories: 1 year category, 2 year category, 3 year category. In 1 year category, what and all are covered? Listed securities other than units. Number 2, units of equity oriented mutual fund and UTI, it can be listed or unlisted. And number 3, zero coupon bond. So all these three are considered short term up to 1 year, more than 1 year it is considered long term. Then 2 year category: unlisted shares, and land or building or both. All these two are considered as short term up to 2 years and long term more than 2 years. Then 3 years category. All the other capital asset, units of debt oriented fund, then unlisted securities other than shares are considered as short term for up to 3 years. More than 3 years it is considered as long term. And I told you that if for a long term capital asset we have to do indexation. So now let us study about indexation. Indexation. So what is indexation? Indexation is nothing but inflating the cost because of inflation. So since the asset is a long-term capital asset, it was purchased very much earlier. Okay, the time value of money differs. Hence, its cost in today's terms will be a higher cost. Its cost in today's terms will be a higher cost. To find that higher cost, we have to find the indexation. Okay. First and foremost, indexation is available only from the year 2001-2002. Okay, indexation is available only from the year 2001-2002. Hence, if an asset is purchased before 1/4/2001, the assessee gets an option. What option? The assessee can take the fair market value as on 1/4/2001, fair market value as on 1/4/2001, or the actual cost, whichever is higher. Whichever is higher, the assessee has the option. Okay, and there is an amendment. Listen very carefully. In case of land or building or both, okay, fair market value as on 1/4/2001 should not exceed the stamp duty value. Okay, so if the stamp duty value is there and if it is lower than the fair market value, then consider the stamp duty value. Basically, on 1/4/2001, see the fair market value or stamp duty value, whichever is lower. Whichever is lower, or actual cost of the capital asset, whichever is higher, should be taken as the cost of acquisition. Correct? So assessee has the option to take fair market value as on 1/4/2001 or actual cost, whichever is higher, it will be considered as cost of acquisition. However, in case of land or building or both, if the fair market value as on 1/4/2001 is more than the stamp duty value, then you have to take stamp duty value. In short, if there is a land or building or both purchased before 1/4/2001, then what you should do? First, fair market value or stamp duty value, whichever is lower, then whichever is lower or actual cost, whichever is higher, will be taken as the cost of acquisition. You get my point? Okay, then the indexation rate for 2001-2002 is 100. Okay, and the indexation for previous year 2021 is 301. This indexation, that is cost inflation index, these both only if you memorize it is okay. All the others will be given in question itself. Fine. Now how to find the indexation? Very simple. Indexation means you have to find the indexed cost of acquisition. Indexed cost of acquisition is equal to cost of acquisition multiplied by cost inflation index in the year of transfer divided by cost inflation index in the year it is first held, that is year of purchase in short, or cost inflation index of 2001 2002, whichever is later. Whichever is later. So cost of acquisition into cost inflation index in the year of transfer divided by cost inflation index in the year first held, or 2001 2002, whichever is later. If an asset is purchased after 2001 2002, then cost inflation index of the year of purchase will be given in the question itself. Okay, so you need not worry. So basically, if an asset is purchased, okay, let me just write here. Basically, if an asset is purchased in 1999, okay, for 1 lakh rupees, then fair market value as on 1/4/2001 is 1.5 lakhs. Then I have the option to take the actual cost or fair market value, whichever is higher, as the cost of acquisition. Hence, I will obviously take 1.5 lakhs. So 1.5 lakhs will become the cost of acquisition. Now how to find the cost, indexed cost of acquisition? For example, let's say the asset is transferred in the previous year 2021. Hence, we have to find the indexation for previous year 2021. How will we find indexation? Indexed cost of acquisition is equal to cost of acquisition, that is 1.5 lakhs, okay, multiplied by cost inflation index in the year of transfer, which is 301, previous year 2021, divided by cost inflation index in the previous year first held, or 2001 2002, whichever is later. So 1999 or 2001 2002, whichever is later. Which is later? 2001 2002. Hence it will be 100. Correct? So for this, if you find the answer, it will be called your indexed cost of acquisition. You get my point? Here, if an asset is purchased after 2001 2002, then here in this place you should consider that year's inflation rate and find the indexed cost of acquisition. Now let's come to improvement. What is improvement, Kanna? Improvement means any capital expenditure incurred on an asset is called improvement of that capital asset. Improvement should also be indexed. How to find the indexation on improvement? Indexation on improvement is equal to, that is indexed cost of improvement is equal to cost inflation index in the year of transfer divided by cost inflation index in the year of improvement. Kanna, however, here you will not notice the wordings cost inflation index of 2001 2002, whichever is later. அந்த மாதிரி எதுமே கிடையாது. There is nothing like that. Why there is nothing like that? Because if there is any improvement done before 1/4/2001, then ignore the improvement. Do not consider it, since it will be included in the fair market value to consider the cost of acquisition. When we are taking cost of acquisition, we take the fair market value as on 1/4/2001. Correct? In this fair market value, the improvement would already have been included. Hence, if there is any improvement which is done before 1/4/2001, then ignore such improvement. Only if an improvement is done after 1/4/2001, then find the indexed cost of improvement. Indexed cost of improvement is equal to cost inflation index in the year of transfer divided by cost inflation index in the year of improvement, okay, multiplied by improvement. Okay, very simple. Now indexation is not allowed in 4 cases. Indexation is not allowed in 4 cases, even though the capital asset is a long term capital asset. What are those 4 cases? Case number 1, section 112A. In section 112A, we are going to learn some special aspects of long term capital gain. In that case, indexation is not allowed. Number 2, if there are any bonds and debentures. So usually bonds and debenture value does not increase with the time. Hence, for bonds and debentures, indexation is not allowed. However, for capital indexation bond and sovereign gold bond, what are they? Capital indexation bond and sovereign gold bond, indexation is allowed. Okay, so except these two bonds, for any other bond or debenture, indexation is not allowed. Next, if a non-resident purchases and sells Indian shares or debentures in a foreign currency. If a non-resident purchases and sells Indian shares or Indian debentures in foreign currency, then indexation will not apply. And finally, number 4, for section 50B, that is slump sale, indexation will not apply. For slump sale also, indexation will not apply. Okay, so I hope you are thorough with the indexation concept. For long term capital asset, you have to compulsorily do the indexation on the cost of acquisition and cost of improvement. Okay, Kanna. Now let us come to proviso 1, that is for non-resident. So if shares or debentures of an Indian company was acquired in foreign currency, then how to calculate the capital gain? First, calculate the capital gain in the foreign currency itself, and then later on convert it into Indian currency. And I already told you here there is no benefit of indexation. So if a non-resident buys and sells shares or debentures of an Indian company in foreign currency, okay, there is no indexation, then what you should do? First find the capital gain in the foreign currency, then convert it into Indian currency. Very simple. Okay. Now let us come to cost of acquisition. Generally, what is cost of acquisition? Cost of acquisition is very simple. It is nothing but the purchase price. Okay, and if an asset is purchased on or before 1/4/2001, then cost of acquisition will be the purchase price or the fair market value as on 1/4/2001, whichever is higher. Correct? However, there are some special cases where the cost of acquisition should be calculated separately. What are those special cases? Let us see. Okay, cost of acquisition. Firstly, cost of acquisition special cases is discussed in section number 49. Section number 49. Firstly, cost to the previous owner. So, whenever a capital asset has come to the assessee, and when the capital asset came to the assessee, it was through a transaction not regarded as transfer. That is full or partial partition of HUF, gift, amalgamating to amalgamated, okay, demerged to resulting, etc. In such cases, when the assessee has received the capital asset, okay, and while receiving it was not a transaction regarded as transfer, in such case the cost of the capital asset in the hands of the assessee will be the cost of the previous owner. It will be cost of the previous owner. Okay, so example, if a HUF is partitioned, when HUF is partitioned and assessee receives the property, okay, but the partition property, then the cost of the partitioned property will be the cost of the previous owner, that is the cost of HUF. You understand my point? So if my father gave me a, okay, if my friend has given me any asset as a gift, or let's say if my father gave me any asset as a gift, okay, then the cost of that gift, okay, will be the cost of the previous owner, that the cost of my father. Okay, not the cost of my father, the cost that my father has given to buy the property. You get my point? So I gave you example of the HUF. Okay, I'll give you another example. So if my father is there, okay, he has bought a capital asset for rupees 2 lakhs, and then he gives me a gift. I am P, he gives me a gift. So when he gives me a gift, it is under section 47. It is a transaction not regarded as transfer, hence capital gains won't arise. Correct? Now, when I am selling that property, let's say to Mr. S. Okay, will capital gain arise? Answer is yes, capital gain will arise. How to compute capital gain? Full value of consideration minus transfer expenses minus cost of acquisition, index cost of acquisition, etc. Now here in the cost of acquisition, what should I put? I received that as a gift, so my actual cost is what? 0, because I got it for no money. Correct? However, in capital gain chapter, you should not put the cost as 0, you should put the cost of the previous owner. So the amount for which my father bought the asset, that is 2 lakh rupees, will be taken as the cost of acquisition. You get my point? So remember this point. So whenever any asset is received, and while receiving the asset it was a transaction not regarded as transfer, then the cost of the asset will be taken as the cost of the previous owner. What are the circumstances? Full or partial partition of HUF, gift or will, succession, inheritance, devolution, liquidation of a company, okay, then revocable or irrevocable trust, holding company to 100% Indian subsidiary, then amalgamating to amalgamated, demerged to resulting, conversion of a property to a HUF property. In clubbing chapter we learnt about individual giving his property to HUF property. You remember, when an individual gives his property to HUF, okay, without or for inadequate consideration, then the income from the property will be clubbed in the hands of individual. That we learnt in clubbing chapter. Now here we are learning that in such case the cost in the hands of that HUF will be the cost of the previous owner. You get my point? Very simple. Now let us learn a special case, that is the case of Manjula J. Shah. Manjula J. Shah. Okay. So firstly, let me tell you about period of holding. What did I tell you? Generally, period of holding is the period between acquisition till transfer. That is the buying date till selling date. However, when the capital asset came to the assessee via transaction not regarded as transfer, in such case, okay, the cost is taken of the previous owner. Similarly, even the period of holding will be taken from the previous owner. So in the example which I told you about my father giving me a gift and me selling that capital asset, in such case the period of holding will be the date on which my father purchased the property till the date on which I sold the property. Okay, so this entire period is called period of holding, and this period of holding will be helpful to determine whether the asset is a long-term capital asset or short-term capital asset. You get my point? Very, very important. However, there is a twist. In the Income Tax Act, it is clearly given that the cost of acquisition will be taken of the previous owner, the period of holding will be taken from the previous owner, but it is not mentioned that indexation also will be taken from previous owner. In the Income Tax Act, it is given that the indexation should be taken from the current owner itself. The indexation should be taken from current owner itself. So for example, if my father had purchased the property in 2012, okay, and he gifted this property to me in 2016, and I sold this property in 2020, then the period of holding will be from 2012 till 2020, correct? The cost of acquisition will be the cost of my father, cost that my father paid, that is rupees 2 lakhs, correct? However, while calculating indexation, it is very, very illogical, because you have to do 2 lakhs multiplied by cost inflation index in the year of transfer, that is cost inflation index of 2020, correct, divided by cost inflation index in the year first held, or 2001 2002, whichever is later, correct. However, in this case, you should only take the cost inflation index of 2016, that is the current owner, that is the current owner's cost inflation index. Even though this 2 lakhs was the cost of 2012, but the indexation should be taken from 2016 as per the Income Tax Act. You get my point? It is illogical, but this is what is given in the act. Okay. However, there was an assessee whose name was Manjula J. Shah, and she went to the Bombay High Court and fought this case in the court of law. So Bombay High Court had given a verdict that even indexation can be taken from previous owner. Okay. So in this case, Manjula J. Shah won the case, and she got to take indexation from cost inflation index of 2020 divided by cost inflation index of 2012. Okay, so this is Income Tax Act, and this is Manjula J. Shah. You get my point? So in Income Tax Act, it is written that indexation should be taken from the current owner only, that is from 2016 in my example. However, Manjula J. Shah had fought the case, and the Bombay High Court told that it can be taken from the year 2012 itself, that is from the previous owner itself. So cost of acquisition from the previous owner and period of holding from the previous owner, but indexation from the current owner. However, in the case of Manjula J. Shah, even the indexation can be taken from the previous owner. You get my point? In exam, if a question like this comes, you have to find an indexation as per the Income Tax Act. Okay. However, you also mention that it can be alternatively found as per the case of Manjula J. Shah case law. Get my point? I hope you are able to understand the concept. So, if there is a transaction not regarded as transfer in between cost of acquisition from previous owner period of holding from previous owner, but indexation from current owner. However, in case of Manjula Jesha, the indexation can also be taken from previous owner. So there are two methods to find the indexation, correct? In exam, what method should we find? We should find the method in which indexation is from current owner, but you mention in the answer that indexation can also be found from the previous owner itself as per Manjula Jesha case. Okay, now let's come to the next. Okay, cost of acquisition where shares are received under scheme of amalgamation. Okay, now another concept. First concept, what did we study, Kanna? If the asset is received, okay, for free of cost, then take the cost of the previous owner, correct? Now next concept, if there is any security that is converted as a transaction not regarded as transfer, that is my amalgamating company security got converted into amalgamated company security, okay, or demerged to resulting, or the bonds, debenture stock, okay, etc., deposit certificate got converted into shares or debentures, or my equity shares got preference shares got converted into equity shares. In all these cases, the cost of acquisition will be the cost of acquisition of the previous shares, correct? So if I am having preference share and it got converted into equity share, then what will be the cost of the equity share? The cost of the equity share will be the cost that I paid to purchase the preference shares. You get my point? I hope you are clear. So if I am having preference shares, okay, and that can get converted into equity share, when it got converted as per section 47, it is not a transfer. So I did not pay any capital gain when the preference share was converted into equity share, correct? However, I had paid rupees 40 to buy the preference share. Hence, when the preference share becomes equity share, then this equity share's cost will also become rupees 40. I hope you are clear. The same concept applies when bonds, debenture stock, or deposit certificate is converted into shares or debenture. It will also apply when the amalgamating company shares are transferred to amalgamated company shares. However, in case of demerger, okay, in case of demerger, there is a small change. So in case of demerger, you have to find the cost of the resulting company share, but for that you have to do a calculation. The cost of the acquisition of shares in a resulting company. I gave you example of the Tanishq brand coming out of Titan, correct? So what will be the cost of acquisition of the Tanishq shares? The cost of acquisition of Tanishq shares will be A into B divided by C. A multiplied by B divided by C. What is A? A is the cost of acquisition of the shares held in the demerged company. That is the cost of acquisition of Titan shares. Okay, Titan. Then B. B is the net book value of the asset transferred in demerger. Okay, that is Tanishq book value transferred. So when Tanishq is coming out, the book value of the asset of Tanishq Limited coming out of Titan will be taken as B. And what is C? C is the net worth of demerged company, that is net worth of Tanishq. Okay. And how to find out the net worth? Net worth is nothing but share capital plus general reserve. Share capital plus general reserve. So A multiplied by B divided by C, you will get the cost of acquisition of the shares in the resulting company in case of demerger. You get my point? Okay. So amalgamation is finished. This is also finished. Okay. Then what is the cost of acquisition of a specified security or sweat equity shares? Okay. So if an employer gives a specified security, okay, that is sweat equity shares, ESOPs, that is employee stock option plan, etc., to the employee, then what is the cost of acquisition in the hands of employee? Now let us learn the next concept. The next concept for cost of acquisition is that whenever a capital asset is coming in the hands of assessee, okay, and if the assessee pays tax on a particular value, then that value will become the cost of acquisition in the hands of assessee. In many places we are going to learn the same concept. So here, when the employee receives the ESOPs or sweat equity share from the employer, then he pays the tax in salary chapter on the fair market value of the sweat equity shares. Correct? We learnt in perquisites. So this fair market value on which he pays the tax will become the cost of acquisition of the sweat equity shares. You get my point? It will become cost of acquisition. So this employer is there, he is giving sweat equity shares to the employee. Okay, the employee is paying the tax on the fair market value under salary chapter. Correct? So this fair market value is going to become the cost of equity shares. So on what value the receiver is going to pay the tax, it will become the cost of acquisition. Okay, now let's learn the next one. Similarly, see here, the cost of acquisition of property subject to tax under section 56(2)(10). So under section 56(2)(10), that is the section we are going to discuss in income from other sources chapter. We will learn that tax has to be paid if an asset or money is transferred for without or for inadequate consideration. Hence, the value on which the tax is paid will become the cost of acquisition of the asset. You get my point? So for example, if any jewelry is transferred from Mr. A to Mr. B free of cost, and Mr. B is paying tax under section 56 to 10. Mr. B is paying tax under section 56 to 10 for this jewelry, then the amount which is considered for the taxation under section 56 to 10, that is fair market value of the jewelry, will be considered as cost of acquisition of the jewelry. Will be considered as cost of acquisition of the jewelry. Basically, I told you three concepts for cost of acquisition. Very important. Listen very carefully. What are the three concepts? Concept number one: if the asset has come to the assessee free of cost, okay, that means in between there was no transaction regarded as transfer. In such case, the cost will be taken as cost of previous owner, period of holding also from the previous owner, and indexation from current owner. However, in case of Manjula Jesha, indexation from previous owner itself. Next concept I told you, that whenever there is any old security and it is converted into new security, then the cost of acquisition should be taken as cost of the old security. Okay, the period of holding also from the old security and indexation also from the old security. Okay, there are many examples where preference share converted into equity, amalgamating to amalgamated, etc., etc. Now, next concept. What is the next concept? If the assessee has received any asset and while receiving the asset, the assessee pays any tax, then the amount on which the assessee has paid the tax will become the cost of acquisition of that particular asset. You get my point? I hope you are clear. Next. Section 45(5)(a) we will discuss when we are discussing section 45(5)(a). Then cost of acquisition of capital asset converted into stock in trade we will discuss when we are discussing that particular section. Now let us come back. Okay. Now let us talk about goodwill, trademark, then right to manufacture, produce, process any article or thing which is nothing but patent or copyright, right to carry on any business or profession which is nothing but license, tenancy rights, stage carriage permit and LUMARs. Stage carriage permit and LUMARs. LUMARs means what? The hours given to use the handloom. Its handloom machine is called loom hours. So generally, if they are acquired, that is if goodwill, trademark, etc., all these assets, okay, if they are acquired, if they are purchased, then the cost of acquisition of such asset will be the purchase cost. Okay, if they are not acquired, okay, but they have received it as a gift or succession or etc., then cost will be the cost of previous owner. Okay. However, if it is self generated, then the cost of acquisition will be taken as nil, that is 0. So goodwill, trademark, patent, copyright, license, tenancy right, stage carriage permit, LUMARS. So for all these, if it is purchased, cost of acquisition will be the purchase price. If it is other than purchase, it will be the cost of previous owner. And if it is self-generated, then the cost of acquisition will be 0. Okay. And for all these assets, there is no benefit of fair market value as on 1/4/2001, because it is very difficult to determine the fair market value. Now next, if there is any asset, okay, on which the cost of acquisition cannot be determined, okay, then the capital asset computation section fails and no capital gain will arise. For example, goodwill of profession. Here we learn only about goodwill of business, and profession is not included in section 55. Hence, for goodwill of profession, it is not possible to find the cost of acquisition. Hence, for goodwill of profession, the computation section will fail and you cannot find the capital gain at all. Okay, this is as per the BC Srinivasa Shetty case law. So if BC Srinivasa Shetty case law, what does it tell? That if cost of acquisition cannot be found out, you also cannot find the capital gain. So for example, in goodwill of profession, nowhere in the Income Tax Act it is mentioned how to find the cost of goodwill of profession. Goodwill of business is given, but profession it is not given. Hence, if a goodwill of profession is transferred, the cost cannot be found out, and hence capital gains at all cannot be arised. Now next, let's talk about financial assets. So financial asset means what? Securities, etc. So in such case, the financial asset, the purchase price will be called the cost of acquisition. Purchase price will be called cost of acquisition. Now let's talk about right shares. I told you in class about the concept of right shares. I am not going into detail. Firstly, let us see what is right exercised. Okay, right exercised. So I gave you example, correct? If Infosys is there, okay, I am a old shareholder of Infosys. So when Infosys wants to issue new shares, it will first give me the right to buy the shares. It will first give me the right to buy the shares, okay, and it will tell the buying price. For example, Infosys has given me the right to buy the shares at 900 rupees. 900 rupees. So if I exercise the right, then I will buy the shares at 900 rupees, correct? Then what will be the cost of acquisition? The cost of acquisition will be the amount paid to the company to buy the shares. That is amount paid to Infosys, which is nothing but 900 rupees, correct? Period of holding will be taken from the date of allotment of the individual, that is Infosys shares. Date of allotment of shares. Next, right renounced. Now, what will happen, I am not interested to buy new shares of Infosys. However, I am having the exclusive right to buy the shares of Infosys. So what I will do is I will sell these right to some other person, let's say Mr. R. I will sell these right to buy the shares at 10 rupees per share. I will tell Mr. R, you give me 10 rupees and I will give you my exclusive right. You can exercise this right to buy the shares. Okay. This is called right renounced. So when I renounce the right, that is when I give my right to Mr. R, then what is the cost of the right? The cost of the right is 0. What is the selling price? The selling price is 10 rupees. Correct? So what is the capital gain? Capital gain will be 10 rupees minus 0, that is 10. You get my point? Then how to calculate the period of holding? Period of holding will be taken from the date of offer. That is the date when Infosys gave me the right till the date when I have renounced the right. Usually it is short term. Usually it is short term. Then right acquired. So in my example, who has acquired the right? Mr. R has acquired the right from me. Mr. R has acquired the right from me for how much rupees? 10 rupees. Later on, he pays 900 rupees to Infosys to buy the shares. So totally how much money does he spend? He spends 10 rupees which he gives to me and 900 rupees which he gives to Infosys. Totally he spends 910 rupees. So this will be the cost of acquisition for the shares of Mr. R. So if right has been acquired, then the amount paid to the right seller plus the amount paid to the company will be the cost of acquisition of the shares, and the period of holding will be taken from the date of allotment of the shares. You get my point? Now let's come to bonus shares. In case of bonus shares, okay, if the bonus was before 1/4/2001, if the bonus shares were issued before 1/4/2001, then cost of acquisition will be the fair market value as on 1/4/2001. If it is after 1/4/2001, then the cost of acquisition will be taken as 0 and the period of holding will be taken from the date of allotment itself. Next, any other capital asset. So if any capital asset was acquired before 1/4/2001, take cost of acquisition or fair market value, whichever is higher. If it is on or after 1/4/2001, take the cost of acquisition. Okay. So I hope you are clear with cost of acquisition. Next, cost of improvement. I already told you, if improvement is before 1/4/2001, the cost of improvement will be 0. If it is on or after 1/4/2001, then the capital expenditure incurred will become the cost of improvement. So now I hope you are clear with the computation section. So full value of consideration, which is nothing but the sale price. Then you should reduce the transfer expenses like brokerage, etc. You will get the net consideration, but do not reduce the security transaction tax. In PGBP chapter, security transaction tax is allowed as a deduction, but in capital gain you should not reduce. Okay. Then from the net consideration, reduce cost of acquisition or indexed cost of acquisition, cost of improvement or indexed cost of improvement. Then you will find the short term or long term capital gain or capital loss. From that you can further reduce the section 54 series exemptions, and then you will get the taxable capital gains. I hope you are clear with the basics. Now all the remaining concepts we will discuss in the next part of the video. So see you in the next one. Till then, take care. Bye bye.